Hey fellow travelers, Mark here with Wolters World, and today we're in York, England, and today we're going to talk about are some of the differences between US English and British English, because even though we speak the same language, sometimes we have no idea what the other person is saying, okay? And I want to kind of make this video to help US travelers coming to England, Scotland, Wales, to kind of understand some of those language differences so they don't have any misunderstandings, but also for the British tourists that are heading to the US, that they don't have the same hiccups as well, okay? And as any good tourist, one of the big things people focus on is food. And there's a lot of food vocabulary differences you should know, and it really starts with the basics. It starts with tea. When you're in the US, tea is a drink you drink. Here in England, a tea is a drink you drink as well. But when someone says it's time for tea or it's tea time, they're meaning it's dinner time. So tea is dinner. So if someone says, oh, there's this high tea thing, they're meaning it's dinner, okay? It's a meal, okay? So whenever you hear that, all right? Now, when you're having dinner, you're having tea, there's all kinds of different foods you're gonna see on there. And one of the things I always love to make sure I have when I hear is my sticky toffee pudding, which is a pudding. And when people say pudding in the UK, they just mean dessert, okay? Whereas in the US, if you say pudding, what people think of is this gelatinous slime that's flavored in chocolate or vanilla, more like a custard kind of thing. So that could get people a little bit confused. Now, the next food that trips people up is the word biscuit, okay? So for my American friends, when you're here in the UK and someone says, oh, would you like a biscuit? They're not talking about a big, fluffy biscuit you get from the South, like biscuits and gravy kind of stuff. A biscuit here in the UK is a cookie or a cracker. That's what you're gonna have. So my biscuit-loving Brits, if you want something like that back in the US, if it's sweet, you want a cookie. If it's savory, you want a cracker. All right, so you don't have that misunderstanding. And if we're gonna talk about tasty treats, I should mention the difference between sweets, lollies, candies. So if you hear sweets in the UK, they're talking about candies, okay? But if you hear the word lolly, usually when they talk about lollies, they're talking about ice lollies, which are popsicles. Now, another food word that people get tripped on is chips. So here in the UK, when someone orders chips, in the US, we would call that French fries, okay? But if you're in the US, if someone orders chips, they're ordering crisps here in the UK. And that's where things get kind of confusing. And for my British friends, when you go to the US, you're getting homesick and you want fish and chips, and you go to an English pub when you're abroad, and you're like, I'm gonna get the fish and chips when I'm there. Make sure you check to make sure that they make the chips French fries, because I've gone to places that were Irish pubs and English pubs in the US, and they had fish and chips, and yes, it was like fried haddock or fried cod, and then came with crisps on the side, not French fries, not chips. So that's one thing you might see some hiccups on. And speaking of on, what about what you put on your French fries or on your chips? Well, here you have tomato sauce, okay? Whereas the US, we call it ketchup. Here it's called tomato sauce. But if you're in the US and you tell someone you want tomato sauce for your French fries or your chips, they're probably gonna think you want like a marinara sauce for your pasta. And if you put like a marinara sauce in somebody's French fries in the US, it won't go over well. They'll be kind of pissed when you're there. And that's another word that has different meanings. Because in the US, if you say somebody's pissed, it means they're mad, okay? But if you're here in England, if you say somebody's pissed, it means they're drunk. So that can be a kind of a big difference kind of one out there when thinking somebody's pissed. Oh, they're just drunk. Oh, they're pissed. They're mad. Yeah, so that can be a difference as well. I think it's important we mention that sometimes when we look at these words in British English versus American English, sometimes we have the same word. It just has a little bit different connotation to it. And I think pavement is a very good example of that. So if you say walk on the pavement here in the UK, they're meaning like the sidewalk. They're meaning this stuff here. Whereas the US, we say, walk on the sidewalk. Whereas the sidewalk is made out of pavement in general in the US, because people think the pavement, you mean the stuff like it could be asphalt, it could be cement or something. They don't really know. Whereas here, pavement just means sidewalk, okay? And if you're going to be walking, another thing you might want to think about are your trainers, okay? So trainers here in the UK are your tennis shoes, your sports shoes, okay? Whereas in the US, if you tell someone you have to go get your trainer, or your trainers, I would say, they're like, wait, you have multiple people that help you work out at the gym? Because that's what trainers are in the US. They help you train and work out, okay? Now, if you got a trainer in the US, you're working out, you probably want to go look good in your pants, okay? The thing is, in the US, pants are like, jeans, trousers in the UK, all right? But in the UK, if you say pants, it means your underwear. So you want to kind of be careful with that, and kind of going with the nether regions down there. I think another word you should know is fanny, because fanny in the US usually means your backside, your bum, okay? Whereas here in the UK, the fanny means the front side of a female, all right? So there's a little bit of difference there when you think about that, because when you hear fanny pack in the US, it's that bum bag you'll see here in the UK, and that could get some people a little snicker here and there for that, all right? And another kind of word that kind of confuses people is when you have your car and you need to get something out of the boot. The boot of the car in the UK is the back part. It's the trunk of the car, okay? Whereas in the US, we say trunk for the back of the car, because a boot is just something that you wear, okay? So a boot in the US, if you say that, all people think of are your wellies, which are your rain boots. And then the front of the car, we call it the hood in the US. That's called the bonnet in the UK. Now we're going to move on to some of the ones that might cause some hilarious confusion if you're making a TV show about Brits and Americans together. And one is if you ask somebody, hey, go knock up Jocelyn. Well, here in the UK, if you say go knock up someone, it means you're going to go knock on their door to wake them up, okay? If you say to knock someone up in the US, it means you get them pregnant, okay? So I can see a few laughs or two in terms of that in kind of comedy gold when you're living with a British person or an American. So continuing on with that knock up theme, I think it's important for us to talk about contraception or correction of math problems. What? Well, let's think of it this way. A rubber. What's a rubber? If you're here in the UK, a rubber is the eraser, the rubber eraser on the back of your pencil that erase your mistakes. Whereas a rubber in the US, that's kind of a slang term for a condom, all right? So you want to be aware of that when you ask for a rubber from your host mom or your teacher when you're in the US as a study abroad student, because you might get a side eye. Excuse me? You need to go see the principal, young man. So do be aware of that. Because honestly, you don't want to have a souvenir of your trips abroad to the Britain or to the US and have to bring back a dummy. And a dummy, I'm not saying an idiot. No. A dummy in the UK is a pacifier for a baby. Because those babies do grow up and they might go to public school. And the thing is, in the UK, a public school is actually a school you pay for. Whereas in the US, a public school is the free school you get for living in a city. You see how these things get really complicated? And you know, if you're walking around the US, you might notice it might seem like they don't like solicitors in the US, because you'll see sign at people's houses that say, no solicitors. Solicitors do not knock. Well, the thing is, a solicitor here in the UK is a lawyer in the US or an attorney. So you can see how that could be kind of weird, because solicitors in the US are people that come to your door, knock on your door and try to sell you something or trying to get you to give money. Because the thing is, some places you have to have a permit in the US to go knock on people's door to ask for money or to sell stuff. Because then if you don't, then you might have the police or the cops come and talk to you. And if you're wondering what police are called here in the UK, like a policeman is called a constable here in the UK. Or if you look for the cop word, a cop would be more of a bobby. You don't hear that one as often, but just think constable for the police officers. You know, and since I am a Yankee if I'm here in the UK, which is funny because Yankee in the UK means pretty much a Yank, anybody from the US. Whereas if you're in the US, you call someone a Yankee, they're either from the North in the Civil War versus the South, or they're from New England. You know, we're talking like Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, that very northeast corner of the US. Now let's get back to some of the food things. Now, when you come around England, you go to the fun fairs around, you're going to see candy floss. And no, it's not candy you use as dental floss in the US. Candy floss is called cotton candy in the US, and the word floss in the US is dental floss. You use that to actually clean your teeth when you're in the US. Now, some more food things I think you need to know is you might see a word called a banger. Okay, so banger is just a sausage. Banger in the UK, sausage in the US, you have that. If you ever see a butty is a sandwich. Here, like your buddy, what's a butty? Like a butt with a Y? I don't understand what that is. That's just kind of a sandwich here in the UK. You might see rasher. A rasher is just bacon, okay, in the US, and it's a rasher here in the UK. And one of the ones I know that kind of threw me off the first time I traveled abroad is the first time I heard the word queue. And the thing is, if you're in the UK, a queue is just a line that people stand in. And just like in the US, queue jumping or line skipping or skipping the line or jumping the line is not cool either place you are in the US or UK. So do be aware of that, because people will call you out. And they might call you out by calling you a Muppet. Now, the thing is if you're from the US, a Muppet is like Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, whereas a Muppet here in the UK means like idiot. Now, if you're going to be driving around England, which I highly recommend because it's very easy to do when you're not in London at least, you're going to look for a petrol station, because petrol is what they call gas or gasoline, because in the U.S. we call it a gas station, and the gas is short for gasoline, and the gasoline you put in your car in the U.S., the gasoline you put in your car here in the U.K. is called petrol, okay? The thing is, though, if you call something gas here in the UK, they're usually talking about natural gas. So like you heat your house with gas or you have a gas stove. Another thing that throws off tourists when they come here is they'll notice when you go to like your inns or your hotels or the buildings, they'll say, oh, it's up on the first floor. You're like, it's up on the first floor. But here's the thing. Here in England and here in the UK, the ground floor is called the ground floor. The first floor up is called the first floor. The second floor up is called the second floor. Whereas the US, the ground floor is called the first floor. And then the first floor above ground is called the second floor. So it's like one off. So sometimes when you rent your B&Bs or your bed and breakfasts or Airbnbs, these inns, like, oh yeah, you're on the third floor. You're like, oh, third floor, I can do that. It's like, wait, no. Third floor UK means fourth floor US. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of steps. So do be aware of that. And if you are at your hotel and you run out of toilet paper or TP, you might hear it called a bog roll here in the UK, because bog is a kind of a slang word for the toilet. Now, oddly enough, the word I probably should have started this video off with is actually the word holiday, because I'm here on holiday in the UK. Okay, so for Brits, if you say you're going on holiday, it means you're going on vacation in the US, okay? Whereas if you say it's the holidays or it's a holiday in the US or I have a holiday, it doesn't mean you have a vacation in the US. It specifically means holidays like Christmas, Easter, 4th of July. Those are holidays. When I go on a trip to relax, that's a vacation in the US. And when I go on holidays, I might want to snog my wife. And the thing is, snogging in the UK just means you're making out, you're kissing people a lot. You know, in the US, you say snog. It has almost like a pig-like connotation, so it's not really good. It just means people are like kissing a lot. I'm sure Jocelyn's like, yes, that's just how you kiss, Mark. But yeah, so that's one thing you might want to think about if things go well or not. I don't know. However you like to travel. And the thing is, you might not be able to travel because you're skint. Okay, if you hear somebody is skint here in the UK means broke in the US, just means you don't have any money. So if you're broke or skint when you're here in the UK, you probably can't afford to go to the footy or the football match, okay? So footy or football is what we call in the US soccer, all right? And then in the US, if you say football, they're talking about American football, okay? And if you come here to the UK, no one's going to know your Chicago Bears, your Dallas Cowboys. They might have heard about them, but it's not really a thing here at all, even though they have games occasionally in London. Yeah, American football, not a thing here. It's all about the footy. It's all about football here. And I would be wrong to talk about English football without mentioning this very important word, and that is gutted. And you might hear this every time England goes to a World Cup or the European Championships, all their fans are gutted because the team loses. And if you're gutted, it means you're really disappointed, like to your hardened soul, just like your guts are ripped out of you because you're so disappointed, which is what happens to English soccer fans or football fans every 4 years. Well, actually every 2, because European Championships and 2 years later World Cup. I think you get the meaning. Bloody hell, Mark, that's kind of mean. Well, there's also sayings you need to know when you're here. And if you hear somebody say bloody hell, it means like dang it. Well, a little bit stronger than dang it, but this is YouTube, so I got to be nice. So that's one saying you might want to know, bloody hell. And the thing is, if you joke around at football matches, the wrong football match, you do need to be careful because you don't want to end up at casualty. Now, this is a word that can be very different and really scare people if they do get sick or if they have to go to the hospital in different countries, because casualty here in the UK means the emergency room. Okay, whereas in the US, if there's a casualty, it means somebody died. Okay, so if you're here and you're like, oh, where'd my mom go? Oh, she's a casualty. She got hit by a car. You're like, oh, she died. Like, she's a casualty? Oh, no. They're like, no, she's at the emergency room. Okay, so that's kind of an important one to kind of know. And I think another thing you'll hear people talk about here is they'll say they're knackered. It just means you're really tired. So knackered here in the UK, it just means tired in the US. So Bob's your uncle, my friend. That means there you go. You pretty much have it all. So you didn't think those were all the words I should mention when it comes to differences between the US and the UK. Here's some other ones. So if they tell you to go to the till when you're at a store, that's here in the UK, that's a cash register in the US, all right? And probably the most important word you might get caught up on if someone says, I need a cuppa. A cuppa here, it's not a copper. A cuppa is a cup of tea, What are the things you have to have when you're here? So never pass up a cuppa when you're here in England. Now, another thing you don't want to pass up on is going to a chippy. And when we say chippy in the US, some people, that means people are a little bit mean. They're like a little chippy, a little short with people, like mean with people. But here, a chippy is just a fish and chip shop. The best place to get fish and chips. I know you get it at pubs here, but it's like next level when you go to the chippy, all right? Now, when you go to the chippy, you want to be careful you don't spill anything on your jumper. Okay, a jumper here in the UK is a sweater, a long sleeve shirt you put on, maybe a sweatshirt or a sweater, you have that. Whereas in the US, if you say there's a jumper, that means someone that's gonna jump and commit suicide. So you wanna be careful with that one. Now, one of the fun ones you might wanna know about is bum. And a bum here in England is your butt, your backside, right? But a bum in the US is a person that kind of lives on the streets, okay, maybe begs for money. So it's kind of a little bit different connotation that's out there. But I think of all the English, like UK words that people might know in the US, I think bum is the one that people know the best. Now, if you're a traveler coming to the UK and you've got little kids, like babies, and you need to get a cot. A cot is a crib in the US, okay? And then so you say, hey, do you have a cot for my little one? And so they can get a crib for you. For my English and Scottish friends that are heading to the US, cribs are more in someone's house. So if you're gonna go to a hotel, ask them if they have a pack and play. That's kind of the newer version of a cot in the US. Now, one thing you wanna be really careful with is the word homely. Because if you go to someone's house in the US, you say, oh, it's very homely, you mean it's ugly. Like if you say someone's homely, you're like, ooh, they're that ugly? Oh my goodness. Whereas here in the UK, if you say homely, it means it's cozy. Now, I'm just outside of Liverpool, and I think this is an important word to know, and that is silverware. Now, silverware in the UK is talking about the trophies you win as a team, whereas silverware in the US is cutlery. It's your forks and knives you eat with. So if you ask, do you have any silverware? Like, yeah, I got a fork and knife. What does that have to do with football? So just know there's a little different one there. And let's say you have a knife and you accidentally cut yourself. Well, the US, you put a Band-Aid on it. Here, they call it a plaster. Whereas in the US, plaster is more of a building material we talk about than anything else. So people wouldn't understand that. Band-Aid is what we call it in the US. Now, I'm getting kind of hungry because this video is getting kind of long. And one of the things I love to get when I'm here is a jacket potato. And if you're not sure what a jacket potato is, it kind of makes sense when you hear this from my American friends. A jacket potato is just a skin-on baked potato, all right? So you have that one there. And some of the words here, it's not necessarily that they use a different word. They might pronounce it differently. Like, we've got a garage in the US, but it's the garage here in the UK. But I think my personal favorite, the first one, the ones that should always be said by everyone when they go to other countries, is aluminum. So in the US, it's aluminum. You have that aluminum can your Coke comes in. Well, here it's aluminium. Okay, so think about that. Aluminium, say it a few times and you can't unsay it. It blows your mind, all right? So what are some other words that don't quite pass the we both speak English test? Let us know in the comments below so we can help other travelers that do speak English know the right way to say it when they go to different countries. And thank you for watching, and please hit that subscribe button if you like fun videos like this. I'll say bye from here and now, Chester, England.